Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with a beginner's guide to Total War Warhammer. In this video, I want to talk about the user interface. There's a lot of information that's actually available at a glance, but unfortunately the game does a really bad job of telling you what it all means. Let's start off with the actual menus around the screen first. Up in the top center, you've got your general battle information. This is the faction you're playing. It'll change depending on whichever faction you are. And this is a countdown timer, which tells you how long is left in the battle if you have a time limit set. It's important to keep your eye on that because if you're the attacking army, when that hits 0, you've lost if you haven't routed or defeated the enemy army. However, if you're defending and you run the timer down, you can win as long as your army hasn't been routed or destroyed. Next, we've got this bar here, and that actually shows you the balance of power. So yellow represents your own army and red represents the enemy's army, and this balance signifies that I have a higher chance of winning right now. Now let's move over to the top right corner here. First, the furthest top, we've got the play speeds. As a beginner, you might want to use pause and slow motion very often to slow the game down, give yourself some time to think and adjust based on what's actually going on the battlefield at the moment. Then we've got the play button, regular speed, a little bit of a speed up ×2, and then speed it up ×3. These two I'll only ever use if I'm waiting for troops to get into position, or if I'm chasing down the enemy during a rout, something like that where I don't really need full control. But apart from that, you'll mainly stick to these three options of speed. And then at the most corner over here, we've got the toggle tactical map button. You can alternatively hit tab to activate the tactical map. So that takes you to this view here, which gives you an overview of the battlefield. So you can see which units you've got laid out where, their icons, you can see their ranks and everything very clearly, very quickly right here. You can also sort of get an idea of what's going on when you're in the middle of a huge engagement. Extremely helpful. Now, because I use the debug camera, and I do have a tutorial that shows you how to get that for yourself, I can actually zoom out extremely high, and I prefer this because it lets me tilt the camera and kind of rotate it and look around as I want. If you don't have the debug camera, you can also activate the tactical map by zooming up to a certain extent, and the top will show you that you're transitioning into the tactical map. If you keep scrolling up at that point, it will flip you into the tactical map. I prefer this though. It's a quick hit of tab or this button at the top right corner to flip you in and out. Finally, we've got the actual minimap itself. You can click on the minimap to quickly move around the battlefield. It's super helpful if you see something happening, if you spot an enemy or a flank going down, or you know that you're engaged in multiple corners. Now sometimes this minimap can be a little too mini for some people, and that's why they've got this double-headed arrow here. If you click and drag that, you can actually resize your minimap, and that just makes it easier to navigate as things get a bit more chaotic. So let's just zoom out a little here and shrink that back down. Now let's move to the bottom right corner here. This is your Winds of Magic counter. Winds of Magic is determined by where you're fighting, and what it does is puts a cap on your magical abilities. If you pick a wizard or magical type of character, you'll see a bunch of icons show up around this Winds of Magic counter. These are all various types of magical spells that your caster can cast. And every time you cast one, it will cost some of these points. They do regenerate over time, but it's important to keep in mind that this number is across the board for your army. Each caster doesn't have a separate reserve. They're all actually pulling from the Winds of Magic in the area. It's a lore thing, and it's a good way to keep a balance. You can't just spam magical units and keep casting magic and wait for it to recharge on an individual basis. Again, this number of Winds of Magic is across the board for every magic caster in your army. Now we've got the central section over here. I'll go over the unit cards in a little bit. First, I want to talk about these buttons down here. I've touched on them briefly in other videos as well. But overall, you've got your toggle unit speed, which you can use R instead for, toggle melee mode, instead of which you can hit F. This forces your ranged units into melee combat, even if they have ammunition. This is the halt order, or you hit backspace, it's to stop your unit in their tracks. And this is the group button. Keep in mind, this is a soft group, it's not a locked group, so they will not maintain formation if you just click on this button here. Set formation. If you have a ranged unit as well as a melee unit selected, this lets you flip between missile front and melee front, and as you hover over them, you'll actually see the pips that show you how they will be arranged. I tend not to use this too much. Sometimes it helps quickly switch the situation. If you've seen an enemy charge coming and you want to pull your missile units back, it's a quick click away. Next over, we've got the guard mode toggle, which helps keep your units in place. If you remember from the other video on how to attack, it's a good idea to keep guard mode on so that high quality units aren't just chasing units off to the edge of the map, and so that your ranged units aren't running after a unit and ending up in the middle of melee combat. Now these last 3 slots are for special abilities. Depending on which unit you have selected, it'll be different options. So for example, if I have a ranged unit selected here, the options are toggle fire at will and toggle skirmish mode. So these 3 do toggle based on the kind of unit you have selected, so keep an eye out. These 3 are the only ones that will change. Now let's go over to the bottom left corner. This is your unit portrait. Depending on the unit you have selected, you'll have a different portrait down there, and when nothing's selected, it's your general. If you actually have a character selected, around the portrait you'll have a few abilities listed. Now these have cooldown timers, and they're not connected to the Winds of Magic because they're actually character abilities. So depending on the character, you'll see things like stand your ground or hold the line, and they all have different effects which when you hover over, you can actually see them listed in the tooltip. So naturally, depending on the character you have selected, there will be different abilities available here. Again, these are character-based, as are these. So the bottom right and bottom left corner are not consistent in terms of their content, but they are consistent in terms of the tools they provide you with. Now, beyond that, we've got 2 buttons at the bottom left here. This one, toggle unit camera, you can only use that when you have a unit selected. And what it does is, on clicking it, it'll start following the unit that you've toggled it on for. So for example, if I have a unit that is, say, marching down here, I'm just going to give the march order, and I've toggled this on, either by clicking on it or hitting delete, when I unpause, you'll see the camera starts to pan with the unit. Finally, at the bottom left, we've got the toggle unit details, or you can get that by tapping I. What that does is it tells you the various traits, characteristics, and stats of the unit you have selected, or the unit you're hovering over, or if nothing's selected, just your general. Now, this is great, especially if you've forgotten the stats of a certain unit. It's excellent to help you familiarize yourself with units, so I'd suggest keeping that on or flipping it on and off again when you're learning and familiarizing yourself with an army. It also keeps a track of the effects of ranking a unit up. Their stats are different based on their rank, and it will reflect that in the unit information card. So let's turn that back off and move to the top left. Now these aren't really gameplay buttons, they're more sort of meta buttons, let's call them. Game menu, chat, guide, help, and the spell browser, and also your advisor if you choose to have the advisor on. Now I'd like to take a quick second to talk about the spacebar menu, for lack of a better name. When you press spacebar, you'll see this little window pop up from the side here on the right. This is a great little customization system that lets you change what you see or don't see when you hit spacebar. So, for example, I have hide foliage checked. What that means is when I hit spacebar, the leaves on trees are hidden. This is great, especially when you have units in woods and whatnot, so that even when you're far away from them, you can hit spacebar and you can see them. So it's a nice little thing to have checked. By default, it's actually unchecked, so when you hit spacebar, the foliage stays around. But apart from that, there are other things that you can hide or unhide. It's really up to you what you prefer to see or not see. I like to keep it by the default simply because I like to get as much information as possible. When I hit spacebar, all these little ticks and pieces of information pop up, and they're really helpful for a quick assessment of what's going on in the battle right now. First things first, at the top of each of the units you have, and the enemy has, you'll get the icon that represents what kind of unit it is. Again, these match up to these icons at the bottom here, so they translate one-to-one, but as I mentioned, they are sometimes a little unclear, a little unfortunate. Next up, we've got their actual rank. It's shown right next to the unit's icon, and you can tell what kind of rank the unit you're currently managing has. So, quick and easy, available right there. Then we've got the health bar, and this white bar that doesn't show anywhere on the card, and I wish it did, because that's the leadership. What that means is how confident your unit currently is. In other words, it's morale. In the Warhammer universe, they like to call it leadership, and if we actually zoom into this unit here that's terrified and hit spacebar, you'll see that they are terrified, and their leadership is all the way down, more or less. So that's a good way to keep an eye on the confidence level of your units so you know what's going on in their hearts. And this yellow bar here below the leadership bar, that indicates ammo. So of course that's only on ranged units where ammunition is actually a factor, and that'll deplete as they run out of ammunition. And finally we've got these little pips at the bottom here. They represent other sort of statuses that your unit is currently undergoing. So for example, my unit here is terrified, whereas Kolek, the enemy unit up there, is fighting in a battle that he's not winning and is also buffed. That's what the upwards arrow means. It also shows you the fatigue level of your unit. So this orange set of legs here, that means the unit's actually getting significantly tired. It's important to keep an eye on that because, as I said in earlier videos, a tired unit fights worse. Now let's take a look at the unit cards. The unit cards are extremely important, not just for selecting units with ease, but also because they convey a lot of information at a glance. So let's tear them apart and see exactly what they're telling you at any given time. First things first, there is this green bar across the top of all the units. That refers to the health of the unit. Now inside this green bar there is a number, and this number tells you how many actual individuals are in the unit. So for example, there are 57 horses in here, there are 120 spearmen in this one, there's one character here, one character here, so that's what the number means. It's important to know that the number and the health bar don't correlate. It's not a one-to-one relationship between the amount of health and the quantity of individuals in the unit itself. Now right below the green bar is this yellow bronze bar down here that only shows up for ranged units, and that is the ammo count. You'll see some of the units that have already been firing for the course of this battle, it's slightly less filled for those units, and as that empties out, it's just a heads up for you to keep an eye on ammunition. After that, you've got the card itself. Now, in some situations, the card will be flashing white or gray. That means the unit is breaking or ready to rout, and if it's gone completely gray, not flashing, but it's completely gray, that means they have started to rout. Now, if they're routing, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a lost cause. You can still recover them, you can still rally them, or they can just run away from the battle far enough to gain some self-confidence again, for lack of a better term. So it is important to keep an eye on the flashing gray cards. Now, again, on the cards themselves, you'll also notice I've got 3 units here with chevrons on their cards. That's an indicator of rank. The ranks go from 0 to 9, so 0 means there's no chevron, and 1, 2, and 3 are bronze chevrons, 4, 5, and 6 are silver chevrons, 7, 8, and 9 are gold chevrons, and they stack to represent the actual rank. This is, again, very important, so you know at a glance exactly which unit is where, who you're selecting, and which situation you're throwing your more valued troops into. Then finally, at the bottom here, we've got the unit type. So, for example, you've got wizards, spearmen, ranged troops that fire arrows, ranged troops that fire guns. Then you've got cavalry. Any cavalry unit will have this horse, next to which there'll be another icon which represents which kind of cavalry unit they are. And then, siege, field gun. I'll be honest, I really feel like there are too many variants of unit types. I understand that there are diverse units and they're all very different in their own way, but if you're going to use icons, they should be a bit more generic. I want to be able to look at an icon and tell exactly what the unit does right away. Instead, you'll see that this icon is actually used for, I think, 3 or 4 different kinds of descriptors, and it really doesn't make sense to me. So that is a slight criticism I have for this interface. I can't always tell right away what I'm looking at. Now, with that said, if you do pull up a unit's info card, and you can see this while recruiting them or while choosing them for a custom battle, it does tell you what they are. So you'll see the Hellblaster volley gun is a field gun. Now that icon again is used for multiple other things, but I find more often than not with this game specifically, when it's not something typical like a spear or a sword or an axe, or a bow and arrow, I'm looking at I'm memorizing what the units do. I don't quite like that, but so be it. And finally, we've got these icons across the top of your unit cards. These are extremely important as well because they actually tell you the current state of your unit. If you ever see this arrow pointing downwards, that means the unit is currently taking fire. It doesn't specify what kind of fire it's taking, only that it's being hit by some kind of ranged unit. Next to that, you see this double arrow. That means the unit is also currently moving fast. It's running. You've given it a charge order or a run order, compared to this icon here, which is a simple move order. Now, these do stack up, as you see, so if there are multiple states to the unit, they will stack up. So let's give this spearman here a random move order, and there, you can see that now they are currently marching. So that's the difference between a double right-click and a single right-click is a march and a run order. Next up, you've got this icon here, and that means that the unit is currently firing. Now, when this firing icon is red, it means the angle of fire is obstructed for some reason or another. In this case here, I've purposely placed these units behind a small hill, and because it's the type of unit that fires straight, it actually can't arc over this hill. As a result, their firing is obstructed. Now, that obviously means they're not getting anything done, so you might want to consider moving them somewhere like, say, at the top of a hill where they actually have vision and the ability to hit something. Also, we've got this icon over here. This means the unit is terrified. Whatever it is they're combating, whether it's some type of magic or a beast, whatever it might be, they're scared, and so they're running away. Very important to keep that in mind because it might require some careful consoling. You might need to give them some support and assure them that everything's going to be okay. Now, I want to flip back to the deployment phase for a little bit to show you some icons that are unique to that phase. For example, you'll see here above these 2 cards, there are these little icons that mean that these units are capable of vanguard deployment. What that means is you can actually deploy these units anywhere on the battlefield as long as it's outside of this thin white line you see here. In other words, you can place units with that icon above their head anywhere on the battlefield as long as it's far enough away from the opponent. So I can get right behind or right next to the enemy's zone because of that icon. That's what that means. Now, these are specific kinds of units, and you'll actually see that information in the unit's description card when you're recruiting them or when you're selecting them for a custom battle. So that's very helpful to know. Another icon to keep your eye out for during the deployment phase is this one over here. Now, it does appear during the actual battle as well, but when it's there during the deployment phase, it means your unit is confirmed as hidden. So that's what that icon means. It means your unit is currently hidden from the enemy's line of sight. In deployment, it only shows when it's in a forest or dense grass or any other type of terrain that could hide it. But you'll notice I've got this other unit here of Demigryph Knights. They're inside this basin, and the enemy actually won't be able to see them because of this elevation difference. However, in the deployment phase, that icon does not appear above their heads. When I hit Start Battle, you'll see right now that this icon will pop right in. So hit Start Battle, and there you have it. Now that both armies have been deployed, the game knows that there's no way that the enemy can spot these guys, and there you have it, they're hidden. And this unit is engaged in melee combat. I know that because of this icon here. Now, this means that it's in melee. It can, however, be in different colors. This color means they're in melee, but it's a standstill, it's a stagnant, kind of an even fight. Doesn't look like it right now, but that's what that means. That actually just turned from green to orange, which is annoying because I was hoping to have both on screen at the same time. But when that's green, it means they're actually doing well in the conflict. They're more likely to win. So green is good, Orange is kind of mediocre. They're stalemate, it's stagnant. You might want to send in some reinforcements if you want to make sure the line doesn't buckle there. And if it's actually red, that means this unit is losing quite terribly. Decisively, I think is the word the game likes to use. So whenever you see that, take a look at what's going on. They definitely need reinforcements, or maybe they need to withdraw. Now, this unit has begun routing. The flashing gray card, as I mentioned, means they're broken or finally they've given up on the battle, so they're going to start leaving, and that's associated with this icon above their head as well. So if the desaturation wasn't enough to give it away, you get this as an extra notifier as well. The user interface in Total War Warhammer gives you a lot of information, and I hope this video has given you a clearer understanding of what it all means. The UI is there to inform you about what's happening at all times at a glance, so that you have all the information and can react appropriately to the situation, and that's what being a great general is about. For more tips and tricks, subscribe to this channel, and if there's something you'd like to see covered, let me know in the comments below.